One of the first things we did in this class is we looked at the allegory of the cave by Plato. And the reason why I introduced this to you is not only because I think it does a very good job of describing our situation, generally speaking, with respect to knowledge in human life, but also because I hope to use it as an image for our explorations in this class. That story has some very important things to say about our predicament. You remember the image. You remember the movements of the story. There are prisoners who were born in this cave, shackled to look at the wall in front of them. They can't turn their heads around. And they see the shadows that are cast on the wall by the fire that is roaring behind them. They think these shadows are the whole of reality. This is all they've ever known. They've never seen anything else. They've never experienced anything else. And so they can't even understand the kind of situation that they're in. A situation that we can understand because we're looking at it from the outside looking in, right? Well, Plato was trying to convince his readers that that situation describes what we are faced with as human beings. We are like those cave dwellers, those prisoners, who have an incomplete view of what's going on, who have a mistaken view, who can't even fully understand the predicament that they're in. The escapee represents the person who uses reason and philosophy to pursue the truth. And that is what I hope you cultivate in this class as well. A desire and a drive to actually investigate things, to reflect, to recognize the situation you're in, and hopefully try to ameliorate it. Because we are all imprisoned in some sense. We are all shackled by these limiting beliefs and conceptions that we hold. We are constantly being fed images and stories about how the world works and how it should be by everyone around us. But how often do we actually reflect on that? How often do we actually question what we're being told? Probably not often enough. So, if you get anything from this story, take these lessons away, okay? We are all, to a lesser or greater degree, in ignorance. But we don't have to remain stuck in that ignorance. We have the capacities to question our situation, to reflect on and research the information that's being given to us. This is not an easy thing. This is not always a comfortable thing, okay? You know what it's like when somebody doesn't want to hear a certain truth. You've experienced that yourself. It's uncomfortable. It's difficult. But with a class like this and the things we're going to be looking over, critical thinking can help offer us a way out. To that end, we've looked at a few different topics so far. We looked at what critical thinking is, how we might cultivate and exercise it, and we looked at the properties of arguments, because arguments are how we, justify our worldview and try to convince other people of things and try to get things done. Today we're going to be continuing to look at arguments. This time we'll do something hopefully a little bit more interesting. We won't just look at, what are the properties of arguments, but we'll look at argumentative fallacies, because everybody falls into these often, including all of us in this room. Errors in reasoning. And so to that end, I have a pretty little cool PowerPoint to show you. Hopefully you'll find it interesting. Then we will take a break, and I'll have you all work on an in-class activity. Sound good? Okay, great. Well, let's begin with a little icebreaker. You've probably read or heard some really stupid arguments in your life, right? Colton, can you express to me, share with the class, what's a really stupid argument you've heard? Or an argument that was fallacious?
Not at the moment.
Not at the moment?
Think of one right now.
What's a really stupid thing you've heard then? That's easy. You hear stupid stuff all the time, right?
Ew.
How about this? The weather in Tampa is great. Is that stupid? I don't know. I think that's stupid. I hate this weather. Here, you can throw it back to me. Has anybody seen what you think is an error in judgment or in an argument recently? Say online. Y'all are chronically online, right? What have you seen online that just you thought was so dumb? Yeah.
Steph Curry's the GOAT.
We're going back to this, right? Anything else? Anything else you've seen recently?
No, I just had that in my mind.
Okay. Thank you, Declan. Anybody? Yeah.
Okay, this might be controversial, but there's this one Today show, and this lady's saying that they should let all the immigrants in because who's gonna clean the White House or something? Like the way she described to saying like we should let the immigrants in because who's gonna do?
Because people won't take up the jobs
Right.
otherwise.
Right, and the way she described it just sounded completely, I guess, racist. Like, she sounded racist the way she was trying to say it. It was just like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, I get where you're coming from, but also, like, not really.
You thought it was silly
Yeah.
and perhaps insulting.
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, anybody else? What's something stupid or fallacious you've heard lately? Yeah.
That Tom Brady carries the Bucs to the Super Bowl.
Okay, explain why you think that was stupid or silly.
Because at the time we had like a top 5 defense. I mean, we just had got our O-line back, like, and Tristan Wirfs and Almar Pep, like, were at the top of the game. We had like the best receiving core with Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. We had a good running back in Fournette. And the only thing we needed was a quarterback, other than Jameis Winston, who would throw to the other defense like 50% of the time. And I was like, bro, Tom Brady didn't carry us. He just helped us, bro.
He was like one part of the picture, right? One piece of the puzzle?
One piece. And Bruce Arians is like a top 5 coach of all time.
Okay.
Really turned our team around.
So do you think that argument was fallacious?
Yeah.
Okay. You probably encounter fallacious arguments a lot. It's not always easy, though, to tell when there's been an error in reasoning. So that's what we're going to investigate today. But before we do that, let's just go over some of those properties of arguments that we looked at last time. Okay? Now, we made a distinction between two different types of reasoning that we might engage in. Deductive or inductive reasoning. Can anybody tell me the difference? Or tell me what you think one of them is. Yeah.
Deductive, the conclusion logically follows from the premise.
Right. Can you explain that in other terms?
So, if the premise is supportive and it follows it logically, then it's deductive. It's based off logic.
Right. Yeah, so the kind of tired argument I trotted out was that one about Socrates. You all remember that, right? How does it go? All men are mortal. And what's the second premise? Socrates is a man. So, what is the conclusion? Right. By looking at an argument like this, you can just see that the conclusion naturally follows from the premises, right? You don't really have to do any work. You just see it, right? You're like, yeah, okay, that follows. That would be an example of deductive reasoning, right? The conclusion logically follows from the premises. You can kind of imagine deductive reasoning as doing something like just drawing out the logical relationships or implications that are already there. We contrasted this kind of reasoning with inductive reasoning. What was inductive reasoning? Conclusion is supported by the premises. Okay, what's the difference?
But not necessarily the conclusion is correct.
Right.
Follow.
It doesn't exactly logically follow, but it's supported by the premises. Could someone give me an inductive argument? Yeah.
The sun has risen every morning, so the sun will rise tomorrow.
Yeah, good. Okay. Is the sun guaranteed to rise tomorrow? Even if it's the case that it's risen every morning? No, it might not, right? It could be true, and it is, that the sun has risen every morning so far. That doesn't guarantee or necessitate that it's going to rise tomorrow. Another example I used was the swans argument, right? I've seen 1,000 swans, all of them have been white, so all swans are white. Well, you and I both know there are things called black swans, for instance, right? You might think I'm justified in making a conclusion like, yeah, all swans are right, after having seen 1,000 different swans that are all white. In that sense, my conclusion is supported by the premises I'm offering, my experiences, my observation. But the conclusion doesn't logically follow. It is merely supported. These are the kinds of arguments and reasoning you'll probably see most often. So, we discussed those different types of reasoning. But then in relation to arguments, we talked about some different properties, right? Deductive arguments can have this property called validity. Y'all remember valid and invalid? What does it mean to call an argument valid? Yeah.
If the premises are true, the conclusion has to be true.
Right. Good. Thank you. If the premises are true, the conclusion has to be true. Deductive valid arguments have that kind of structure. So if the premises are true, the conclusion is going to be true. However, we can also have invalid deductive arguments. And there are a lot more of this type. Because invalid deductive arguments can have true premises and a false conclusion, false premises and a true conclusion, false premises and a false conclusion. They can come in all of these different examples. On the other hand, inductive arguments cannot be valid or invalid. Okay? We consider them strong or weak, depending on, well, how well the conclusion is supported by the premises. These are the main two types of reasoning that we looked at, and the properties of arguments that we looked at. Now, quickly before we go on, could someone tell me what an argument is? Just to remind us. Yeah.
Consists of statements that are either false or true, which provide reasons for a proposition.
Right. Arguments are a series of statements. And statements are sentences that can either be true or false. So in this critical thinking class, we're going to pay special attention to the arguments that we explore in these different texts. You're going to get a lot of different arguments thrown at you. And I hope that while you're reading through that material, you'll think, okay, what exactly is the argument here? What are the premises? What is the conclusion or conclusions? Does this seem like a deductive argument or an inductive argument? Is it valid or invalid, strong or weak? All of these things should be running through your head as we go through the course content. Okay? It'll help you become a better critical thinker, and it's going to help you suss out, well, how good are people's arguments really? How justifiable are they? Do they have good reasons for the view they're putting forth? Okay? All right, good. Now, today we're switching gears a little bit, and we're looking at errors in reasoning. Okay? More specifically, we're looking at logical fallacies. What are logical fallacies? Well, they're basically constituted by the use of improper reasoning in an argument. There are many ways our reasoning can go wrong. Okay? Today we're going to look at about 15 fallacies. This list will not be exhaustive. Okay? There are a multitude of ways for our reasoning to go wrong compared to our reasoning going right. Okay? My mentor and one of the authors of the book I asked you to read for today, chapters 2 and 3, Dr. Sandra Dwyer, wrote, "We call logical fallacies bad arguments that happen so often we give them names." And what we're going to hope to do in today's class is I'm going to lay out a bunch of fallacies for you, these errors in reasoning, in argumentation, and then I hope you'll be able to spot them. Not only out in the world when people are talking to you about things, but also in the text that we look at in this class. Because if you know these fallacies and if you can spot them, that will be an incredible skill for you in sussing out how strong these arguments are and figuring out what it is that you should believe and perhaps what you should persuade others of. If I were to make a general claim about logical fallacies, I would say this. Oftentimes, they utilize reasoning in a way that is irrelevant to the overall point. And we're going to be looking at a few of these today. Y'all know what that is like, right? Having a conversation with someone, you're talking about one thing, arguing about one thing, and then they bring in something that you think is completely irrelevant, right? And they point to that, and they're like, well, what about that? Well, this is an error in reasoning that we often see. And don't worry, if you can't write all this down, I will be uploading it onto Canvas. So you can always do it later. An important note, though, before we really start. Just because someone is using a logical fallacy doesn't mean their conclusion is false. Okay? You can use faulty reasoning to get to a true conclusion. It happens often. Okay? But what we care about in this class isn't just pursuing the truth. We also care about constructing strong, reasonable arguments, giving good reasons for our beliefs. So, I hope you hold yourself to this standard, not just to say what you think is true, but also to strongly back up what you say without errors in reasoning. We always want the statements of our arguments to be consistent. We always want our logic to be solid. Okay? So, even if somebody is saying something that you might think is true, it's still a good idea to interrogate the logic, the reasoning behind that argument. We can and should question that. That's part of what it means to be a good critical thinker. And part of what it means for you to, well, improve these skills and to be able to reason well and construct good arguments. Okay? So, in this class and other philosophy classes like this, as well as in your job, in your life, in your conversations with other people, it is imperative that you learn to reason well and to back up your views with that solid reasoning and evidence. That is what we're going to try to do in this class. Not just say true things, but back up what we say with good arguments, with solid reasoning, with impenetrable justifications. All right. Any questions so far? Is this stuff making sense? To a point on reasoning just briefly. Generally, we can spot when there's been an error in reasoning. Generally, we can just kind of see whether somebody's reasoning is good or bad, whether they have good reasons for their belief or not. But I want to remind you that this, like critical thinking, is a skill. Okay? You're not going to get better at it discovering fallacies and pointing them out, or backing up your own views or persuading other people without actually practicing this stuff. Hence, the in-class activities that I'm going to give you throughout the semester. I'm going to give you a lot of opportunities to improve these skills, but you actually have to take advantage of them. Okay? Now, if you don't want to, that's your prerogative, but I don't think it's wise. All right. Let's begin then. We'll start off with the first fallacy. Red herring. Does anyone remember this from the reading? Mind if I take this? Thanks. Red herring. Yeah. Right. Good. Again, this would be an example of that thing we mentioned earlier. Bringing something into the argument or conversation that is kind of irrelevant to the overall point. Okay? Exactly. When somebody's involved, or using, I should say, this kind of logical fallacy, they're trying to redirect the person's attention from the relevant issue or argument to something else. If I said, for example, it's important for you to pay attention in this class, and it's important for you to do the exercises. This is all going to be good for your grade, okay? And it's going to help improve your critical thinking skills and your ability to act in the world, okay? And then you said to me, I'd rather just listen to Noah Kahn. Is that addressing the argument I'm giving you of why you should pay attention to class? Not really, right? You haven't refuted anything. You haven't addressed any of the reasoning that I've laid out for you. This would be an example kind of a red herring, depending on the scope of the conversation. Take another example. Let's say we're having a discussion or an argument that farmers shouldn't use pesticide in their crops. If the other person says, but people need to eat fruits and vegetables, farmers shouldn't stop producing their crops, this would be an example of a red herring. Because what is the point of the argument? Well, the person is providing all these reasons why farmers shouldn't use these pesticides in their crops. But what does the person respond with? People will die if they don't eat fruits and vegetables. That's not up for discussion, right? This isn't what's being contested. Everybody would agree, yeah, fruits and vegetables are important. It's about the agricultural practices, not whether or not they should stop farming altogether. Does this make sense? Could someone provide me with another example of a red herring? Otherwise, I'll chuck this ball at you. Yeah.
Saying football is better than soccer, and they respond, I hate sports.
Sure. Yeah, let's say you're offering a bunch of reasons why football is better than soccer, and they're just like, well, sports, they're just dumb anyway. Yeah, they're not refuting any of your reasons, right? They're not addressing any of your reasons. They're just redirecting your attention to something else. Perhaps whether we should watch or care about sports at all, which is not the point of the argument, right? Okay, good. So we have red herring. Let's look at another one, straw man. Can anyone tell me what a straw man is? Yes?
Choosing like a weaker argument to make up for that previous argument, like a stronger argument, like choosing a weaker argument within a stronger argument to attack.
Could you explain that a little bit further?
Like, we're talking about like the football one.
Yeah.
You could say like, instead of saying like football, like the reason why you think football is better than another one, you just choose like, well, it's just dangerous. Like you just choose like a specific thing within it. to hone in on.
Okay, I think you're honing in on something important, which is when somebody's engaged in a straw man, there's some misrepresentation going on. Yes?
I was just going to say it's when you misconstrue someone's argument and then, you say that argument is false, even though it's not the argument that the person made.
Right.
So you're like grasping at straws of the person's argument.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great description of it. A straw man always involves someone misconstruing the person's argument. Okay? They misconstrue or they misrepresent it. And then rather than attacking what the person was originally saying, they go after the misrepresentation that they just constructed. That's what it means to engage in a straw man fallacy. So if you said, for instance, look, I think we should increase the budget for social welfare programs or something. And the person said, oh, you think we should be giving money to people who don't work? Is that what the person originally said? No, they're talking generally about like economic and social policy, okay? Not that specific thing. Their argument was just misconstrued, misrepresented there. Or take another example. In response to an argument that says the U.S. government should prioritize taking care of their own citizens before others, someone responds with the following. Oh, so you're saying the U.S. shouldn't help out any other countries at all? That's ridiculous. If the U.S. has money, it should help out less privileged countries. That's not the thing that was in contention, right? There's a misrepresentation that's happening here. Maybe the U.S. should be more interventionist, or maybe it should be more isolationist, whatever. But a straw man always involves the person misrepresenting their opponent's argument and then attacking that because it's easier to refute. Could anybody provide me with another example?
You could say Kanye is too controversial to play Raymond James, then someone could be like, oh, Kanye is just, he's good. Let's take what you can play.
Sure. Wherever there's a significant misrepresentation occurring, and the person attacks that they just made up, they're straw manning you. And this is a fallacy that happens a lot, right? All the time online. If you've ever been a part of any online groups or platforms, you probably experienced this, right? So, be on the lookout for it. This is one that happens often. Okay, good. Let's move on to the next one. Appeal to fear. Does anybody remember from the reading what this is about?
Basically making them afraid instead of giving them multiple reasons. So instead of proof is fear, like making them scared. That's how they proof.
Right, yeah.
I feel like a lot of religions do this.
Okay.
They fearmonger their people in a way of controlling them instead of actually giving them a logical reason why they should believe in that faith.
Sure. Yeah, or rather than attacking the criticisms,
Right.
right? They try to make them fear to muscle them
Yeah.
into submission maybe? Sure. Yeah, the appeal to fear is an easy one. We're going to have a lot of appeals that we're looking at today. Basically, this fallacy involves, well, instead of addressing the person's argument, they do something like claim something bad will happen to them if they don't do what they want. You've probably seen this in countless TV shows you've watched, right? Like The Sopranos or something. What do groups like that often do? Break your kneecaps, right? Or, they'll go up to the shopkeeper and be like, hey, you should really sell to us and give us a discount, so on and so forth. Or who knows what's going to happen to you. Right? Yeah. This is an easy one. So the example I came up with was this. In response to an argument in which a shopkeeper wants to charge every customer the same price for the items in his store, some mafia members say, well, if we don't get a little discount, who knows what's going to happen? The mafia members here aren't addressing the shopkeeper's argument about why he should charge every single person who comes in the same price. Instead, they're trying to, persuade the shopkeeper to do what they want by stoking fear in them. They're not addressing his argument. Okay? Can anybody provide me with another example? Yeah.
If you don't vote for X politician, the country will be corrupt.
Sure. Like, let's say I lay out a bunch of reasons why you should vote for Mr. So-and-so. And then you say, instead of addressing any of those reasons, instead of addressing that argument, you say, well, look, you should be afraid if Mr. So-and-so gets elected because all these bad things are going to happen to you. Well, you haven't addressed the reasoning. You haven't addressed the argument there, right? You're bringing something in completely different. Good. Thank you. Okay. Similarly, how about appeal to pity? How does this one go? Yeah. Aspen.
If you don't do or believe something, then something bad will happen to somebody else.
Can y'all come up with an example for this one? Yeah.
When, oftentimes in, movies and stuff, the bad guy will come to the person and be like, oh, if you don't do this, I'm going to hurt your family.
Sure. Yeah, let's say the good guy and the bad guy, right? They're up on the rooftop. And they're having the conversation, and the good guy is giving him all these arguments and reasons about why he shouldn't send the nukes out to blow up all these countries. Instead of addressing any of those arguments or reasons, what does the bad guy say? Just think of what's going to happen to the poor people in New York City if you don't let me go, Mr. Spy. Right? The bad guy's not addressing the spy's argument. Instead, he's appealing to pity. I get this a lot. Here's a good example. Let's say I lay out an argument for you that this is the grade you earned in my class, and this is why, and here are my reasons. And you say this: if I don't get a B, I'm going to lose my scholarship. You should feel bad for me. This is terrible. Do you want that to happen to me? Well, you didn't address any of my reasons or argument, okay? You're just trying to emotionally manipulate me. So no, I will not fall for that. This would be an example of a fallacy, okay? You can see a common thread between all these, right? In these fallacies, the opponent isn't addressing the person's argument or reasoning. Instead, they're trying to do something else in order to persuade the person to do what they want. That's something you'll see a lot in these fallacies. So does this one make sense? The appeal to pity has to involve, instead of addressing the person's argument or reasoning, they claim something bad will happen to themselves or someone else, which is irrelevant. It's completely unrelated to the logic of the argument being given to them. Okay. Let's look at another easy one. The appeal to popularity. What do you think this one is about? How does this go? Yes?
It's basically saying that, since something's very popular, it has to be true.
Can you provide an example?
Like traditions, like in certain cultures, when the Aztecs used to sacrifice someone, like it was very popular back in the day. And it's like, if they're doing it to receive blessings from a god to get rain, like it has to be true that we have to sacrifice people, even though that's really not true.
Look at how popular it is. Look at all these people who believe in it. Are they really all wrong? Maybe they might say something like that. Yeah. Y'all recognize this image? Or is this too before your time? Yeah, the appeal to popularity is a fallacy which involves arguing for something on the basis of, well, it's popular, so that's why you should believe it, or that's why you should accept it. Can anybody give me an example? Yes?
Nikes are the best brand because everyone wears them.
Yeah, Nikes are the best because everyone's got them, man. Yeah. Well, are they really the best just because a lot of people buy them and they're popular? Is them being the best have anything logically to do with how popular they are? Maybe. Yeah.
Everyone used to think Earth was flat.
That was a popular view, right? What was the view? Well, it was something like, look, we live on this flat plane, and we have this dome on which the stars are arrayed. That was a very popular view. Yeah, so somebody said, look, this view is really popular. That's why you should believe it too. You should think to yourself, maybe everybody is just idiots. Right? Because the thing's popularity doesn't necessarily have any bearing on whether or not the thing is as the person claims it is. For example, if somebody said, well, look, like the majority of people in the U.S. are Christians, so obviously Christianity is true. Maybe Christianity is true. But this is a bad argument. Right? Just because something is popular doesn't mean you should think it's true. Okay? And you all know this. Okay, how about the next one? Appeal to novelty. How does this one go? Yeah?
It's like saying that, if a store manager wants to set a store a certain way, then they if it worked 2 weeks ago, it's going to now.
Say more. I think you might be getting on it,
It's
but
saying that something that's right in a short time must be right because it's been correct in the past amount of time. That's within a short amount of time, 2 weeks.
there's something you're hitting on, but yeah,
Something's better because it's new.
that's a good way of summing it up. Yeah. For example, check out these shoes. These are new. All right? And because they're new, they're better than your shoes. Is that a good argument? No, why not? And you're like, yeah, these shoes are obviously better, right? For all these reasons. Yeah. Look, a thing's being new doesn't necessarily mean it's better, right? Anybody else get pissed off at what Apple does with their charging ports? Yeah. Yes.
Is there something for if it's old, the opposite?
Yeah, we're going to get to it. Yeah. Yes. So, take the following example. Let's say I give you an argument about the Earth, and you say back to me, well, there's a new scientific view based on evidence that the Earth is flat, and because it's a new view, it's obviously the true view. What would I say to you? What are you talking about? Just because it's new doesn't mean it's true or better, right? And you all know this if you have Apple products. Good. Okay. Now we get to the one that you wanted to bring up. Appeal to tradition. How does this one go? Yeah, Emma.
Since it's been happening for so long that it has to be true. Like, for example, you can go back to like the Earth thing. Like, and since we've known for so long, and we have so much research on the Earth being round, it has to be round. Like, there's no other contradiction that can happen to it.
Sure. Yeah. It has to do with arguing that because something is old or it's traditional or it's been in practice for a long time, that means it's true, or that means it's good, or that means it should be accepted. Can anybody think of an example? Yeah.
Just like assuming or saying that, Michael Jordan's the GOAT of basketball because he had done it for so long.
He's been considered the GOAT for years and years and years. Everybody accepts that he's the GOAT, so obviously he's the GOAT, right?
But that doesn't mean it's true because like Steph Curry's here now.
Right. The example I came up with was something like this. If someone said to you, look, the Catholic Church has never allowed women to be priests in an official capacity, so obviously that's the right and good thing to do, because this is our tradition. That would be an example of using a fallacy. Okay? Just because something has been done for a long time or it's been accepted for a long time doesn't mean it's necessarily good and true. For example, slavery, which occurred for almost the entirety of human history until recently, right? Just because it's happened a lot and it's traditional doesn't necessarily mean it's good and true, right? You can think of a lot of examples like this. Just because USF has done things for decades and decades doesn't necessarily mean they're doing things the right way, right? Okay. How about another appeal? Appeal to authority. What do you think this one means? I appreciate your participation, Elijah. Let's get somebody else. Okay, yeah.
Saying something is true because someone in a position of power said it was true.
Right. Good. The fallacy goes like this. You should accept this thing, or you should accept this argument because someone in a position of authority said it was true, or holds this view, or argues for this view. For example, if one of the other students in class came up to you and said, well, you should really trust everything Professor Gunner says because he's in a position of authority over you. Is that a good argument? Yes or no? No, why not?
Just because your professor doesn't mean it's correct.
Right. Do you think I get everything right all the time? Do you think I am, infallible? No, of course not. We can come up with countless examples of this, right? Somebody in a position of power or authority, they say something is the way it is. Well, just because they said that doesn't necessarily mean it's good or true, right? Take the following example. Somebody says, well, the president said that we should support those people across the pond. He's the president, so he must know what he's talking about. Is this a good argument? The president could be wrong. The president could be mistaken. One's position of power and authority doesn't have any necessary relationship to the truth of what they're saying. They're completely disconnected. Yeah?
How would this work whenever you see, whenever people tell you, listen to your elders because they know more than you and they're wiser? How would that work compared to appeal to authority?
That's a good question. Yeah, so this is one of the difficult things about content like this. I'm going to give you examples later, passages in which there's a fallacy, and I'm going to ask you to figure out what the fallacy is. When I construct passages like that and lay it out for you, it's pretty clear cut. Okay? But whether or not somebody is actually engaging in a fallacy is going to depend on a number of things. Why exactly they're saying that? What is the context of the conversation? What is the overall point of the argument? Because it wouldn't be a fallacy, for instance, if I said, look, you should accept what Uncle Greg says about the military because he's had a lot of experience. He knows a lot of military people. If I just gave you a bunch of reasons and I was like, on the basis of all these reasons and inductive reasoning, it would be wise to listen to what he says. That might not be a fallacy. But it's going to depend on the context of the situation. So it's a little fuzzy. It's a little messy.
What about when someone asks you to do something, and you ask them, well, why do you want me to do it in this moment? Or why do you want it a specific way? And they say, because I say so.
What do you think about that? Does that seem fallacious to you?
Yeah, I don't get that. That's not an answer. Because I said so is not an answer.
I agree.
Give me an answer.
If they don't address, say, if they don't provide any reasons or give any reasons, and they just say, well, you should do what I say because I'm your mom.
That's not an answer.
Does that seem like a good argument to you?
No.
It's not. It's not a good argument. So in an instance like that, I'd be liable to say, okay, appeal to authority, Mom? Really? No, I never would have said that to my parents. I probably would have been hit, But yeah, that's a good question. Again, it's a little fuzzy. It's going to depend on the context of the situation, of the conversation, the overall point. Okay, how about ad hominem? How does this one go?
You tackle one's personal characteristics rather than argument, and you attack the person other than the reasons they're giving, and you attack the person.
Great. Yeah, again, this is an example of a fallacy in which the person isn't addressing the argument, right? They're doing something else. So if I said, for example, y'all should really drink water. Your body's made of a lot of water. You need a lot of water. You can't survive without water. Somebody ad hom me.
You're not as healthy as I am.
You're not as healthy as I am. You're a loser and you suck. So I'm not going to listen to what you're saying. Yeah, if the person isn't addressing the argument, but they attack the person's character, that's an ad hom. Okay? Do you see this a lot online? Yeah. The argument isn't addressed. Instead, they just attack the person's character. Guilt by association is similar. And it goes like this. Well, because I know you met with Jenna, and Jenna is a bitch, I'm not going to trust what you have to say. Okay, so I met someone sometimes, so that makes my argument bad? No, that's stupid, right? That's how guilt by association goes, okay? Either there's an attack on the person themselves, or there's some sort of implication that's made. Instead of addressing the person's argument, they're like, well, because you're associated with this person I don't like, that must make what you're saying false or bad. Fallacy. Bad argument. Okay? Or take this one. In response, let's say this guy lays out an argument. Mr. Smith argues for raising taxes. And somebody else on the Senate floor says, Mr. Smith is always scheming. Since we can't trust him, we shouldn't raise taxes. Well, they're not addressing Mr. Smith's reasons for or argument for raising taxes. They're just saying, you got a bad character.
That's the guy can't be talking. They're politicians. They're always scheming.
Yeah, maybe. Or take the guilt by association thing. Obviously, we can't trust Mr. Smith's argument for raising taxes because he went on that one alt-right podcast. So we know we can't trust him and what he says is bad. That's not addressing the argument. Okay?
Is guilt by association only for people, only associated with
people, or can you get frustrated with baseball? Like just because you're part of this facility, or you're a part
Yeah,
of
sure. Like an institution, maybe? Yeah, sure. It can extend to that. It could extend to aliens, let's say. You know, aliens show up tomorrow and a lot of people don't like them, and they learn that, oh, Professor Gunner is in talks with the aliens. So instead of addressing my arguments, they're like, can't trust Professor Gunner. That would be an example of guilt by association. Yeah, so I think it could extend to people, institutions, other intelligent life forms, maybe. Yeah. The general idea is simple. Instead of attacking the person's argument, they try to undermine it by attacking their character. Got it? All right, good. A few more. Genetic fallacy. Does anybody remember this one from the textbook? Genetic. What do you think of when you think genetic?
Based off like your family and stuff, like someone could say an argument and you're like, well, your brother did this, so why won't you do that?
You're honing in on something. Yeah, it has to do with your relationship to the information. What do the rest of y'all think? Genetic fallacy.
Wouldn't that be similar to GBA?
Say that again?
Wouldn't that be similar to GBA?
In what way?
Well, if it says about your relation to the information, like, because GBA would be your relationship to, let's say, an institution or someone that represents something, then your arguments aren't valid.
Right.
Genetic, something in between GBA and like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, good. Yeah, you're onto something there. Again, this is another fallacy that involves, well, instead of attacking the person's argument or reasoning, what do? They either argue for their position based on, well, it came from this source, or they discount your argument or reasoning because they say, well, it came from this source. If that is all they're saying, they're engaged in a fallacy. Okay? For example, let's say we're having an argument about art. Whether or not this piece on the wall is masterful, whether or not it's good, whether or not it's a great example of art. If you said, well, your view is obviously wrong since you're not an artist, and my view is right since it's based on Picasso's own opinion, they would be engaged in a fallacy. Why? Well, because they're saying your argument should either be accepted or rejected merely on the basis of where that information came from. Does this make sense? The source of the information or the argument has no necessary logical bearing on whether it's reasonable or it's truth. Now, whether or not information comes from a particular source might give you reason to question or doubt it. Good. That's good. Reasonable. Makes sense. But if somebody is discounting your argument just on the basis of, well, where it came from, that's a fallacy.
Can you go more into the difference between genetic and guilt by association? Like he was saying, like how to decipher the two.
Yeah, I mean, they're similar. So guilt by association, again, has to do with discounting argument or reasoning on the basis of, well, who you are associated with. And what does genetic have to do with? Well, the source could be anything. They're related, but it's discounting argument or reasoning based on source of argument or reasoning. So, for example, somebody says to you, well, your argument why USF should allow food and drink in classrooms is obviously bad because I know you got that argument from President Trump. And I don't like him, so your argument's obviously bad. Like, let's say you were friends with President Trump, and he gave you this great argument. Where you got your argument from doesn't have any logical, necessary bearing on its truth or whether or not it's reasonable. Unreasonable people say reasonable things. Reasonable people can say unreasonable things, right? The source itself doesn't determine its truth or its reasonableness. Does that make sense? We actually have to look at the argument itself. What's the evidence? What's the reasoning here? Regardless of where it came from. On its basis, is it reasonable? Is it strong or valid or whatever? Does that make sense? Okay. Slippery slope. How about this one? Y'all remember how this one goes? Yeah?
Isn't it like you start off with one thing and then it just kind of snowballs into other ideas?
You got a point there? Yeah? Yeah? What say ye? The rest of you. Slippery slope fallacy. You've all experienced this. You've all seen this online. Yeah.
When someone makes like a very small argument, and then someone else like takes it and blasts it out of proportion.
You're both honing in on something important, which is this. Thank you. The slippery slope fallacy involves, saying that if we let this thing happen, necessarily all of this bad stuff is going to happen too. That's basically what the slippery slope is. This one can be a little fuzzy. Because look, say somebody said the following. If we make pornography illegal, then people will become sexually frustrated and destroy society. Therefore, we have to keep it legal. The implication here is that, look, banning porn is going to lead to, like, the purge. Necessarily, it's going to lead to the purge. Is that true? Is it reasonable to think that banning porn is necessarily going to lead to the purge? Well, it could, it might. This is why it gets a little fuzzy because, look, somebody could say to you, we shouldn't ban this thing because in the past when we've banned it, historically it's led to this, this, and this. So I think it might also lead to this, this, and this now. They wouldn't be engaged in the slippery slope fallacy then. It's only when they say, these bad outcomes are definitely going to happen if we do this. That's when they fall into the slippery slope fallacy. So if somebody is saying, on the basis of past experience and data, I think inductively these bad things might happen if we do this thing. Not a fallacy, but if we do this, this is definitely necessarily going to happen. We can't do it then. Slippery slope fallacy. It can be tough sometimes to tell when someone is falling into this and when they aren't. Again, you have to look at the context of the conversation.
So, can you explain like the difference between this and an appeal to pity? Like, wouldn't that technically be the same? Be like, you don't do this, then something bad will happen.
Good question. So, appeal to pity involves appealing to the arguer's emotions. And it's like, you should accept or do what I say because look at all the bad stuff that's going to happen to me and these people. Like, it could be a form of emotional manipulation. Whereas the slippery slope, it might not be appealing to your emotions at all. It might just say, yeah, this bad stuff is going to happen. That's it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, one's personal, one's general.
Yeah, that's a good way to capture it. Yeah. One is a little bit more playing with your emotions. The other this one might not have nothing to do with your emotions at all. And it might not be intending to manipulate you with your emotions. Got it? It can be a little tough to tell when this one is happening. Okay. Appeal to ignorance. Y'all remember this one from the reading? How does it go?
Something hasn't been proven to be false, so it's true.
Right. Well, look, it hasn't been proven to be false, so it's true. For example, well, look, we haven't proven there aren't tiny little goblins living in the quantum foam, so the tiny little goblins are there. That would be an example of appeal to ignorance. Why? Well, look, just because we haven't disproven it doesn't necessarily prove the opposite. Okay? We haven't disproven God. We haven't disproven aliens. We haven't disproven that there are tiny little goblins that you can't see that are living in this table. But just because we haven't disproven those things doesn't mean that their existence is proven. Make sense? This one's rather easy. So if someone tries to argue for something on the basis of us being ignorant about it, they might be falling into this fallacy. Okay, let's finish this up. Mott and Bailey. Anybody remember this one from the reading? It has to do kind of with how villages and castles were often organized hundreds of years ago. It goes a little something like this. Just as during that time, there was a village that people lived in that was kind of difficult to defend, but there was a castle that was nearby that was much easier to defend. When invaders would come attack the village, well, the people would flee from the bailey into the motte because it was more defensible. The same thing can happen in argumentation. Someone gives you a view that is easy to critique. Let's say they offer you a general view. It's easy for you to poke holes in it. And then when you try to poke holes in it, they retreat to a different view that is more defensible. For example, Mountain Dew is the best soda of all time, your friend says. And you say, well, no, I mean, look at all these surveys, look at all this, and look at all this. And then they say, well, no, what I was really saying was that, Mountain Dew is better than half of the sodas. If somebody is laying out a view and then they retreat to a different view, a more defensible view, they're falling into this fallacy.
An example is the goat curry. It's that conversation and you retreat to like the best shooter ever.
Sure. It's easier to defend, right? Yeah. How about the following example? Aaron says, I think the U.S. government is morally obligated to redistribute its resources. And when pressed on this view, Aaron falls back on, are you telling me life is fair for everyone? Shouldn't everyone be given a fair shot? Well, that's a different position now, isn't it, than the thing he just said? A more defendable position. Yeah.
When people are doing this, like in the example that you showed, do they often try to almost use like the fallacy of pity a little bit too as a defense mechanism?
They might, yeah, it depends on the conversation. Yeah, like this one. Maybe, yeah. When you think Mott and Bailey, just remember, vulnerable view, If that view gets attacked, the person retreats to something that is more defensible, easier to defend, easier to argue for. That's the Mott and Bailey. Okay. Finally, we have non sequitur. Does anybody know what non sequitur means? Comes from Latin. I should know. I took 5 years of Latin. It means it does not follow. You see this fallacy a lot. It's a fallacy which involves jumping to a conclusion that does not follow from the premises. For example, this marker is green, that water bottle is green, so the sky is green. Does that follow from those two premises? No. You probably see this one a lot. Can anybody give me an example? And then we'll break. I think this is the last fallacy I have. We'll check. Give me an argument in which the conclusion doesn't follow from the premises. How about this? All men are mortal. Socrates is a man, so Professor Gunner is the best professor ever. Does that follow from the premises? No, you're duh. Okay, give me one.
I've only met females on the same major as me, so everybody at USF is female.
There you go. Does that follow from the premises? No. This one's easy, right? Makes sense? There you go. All right. Let's see if we have any more here. I think that might be it. It is. Okay, good. So these are fallacies that you've heard, you've experienced, you've probably used them yourself. It's hard to tell sometimes when somebody's using a fallacy, but if you pay special attention, you can notice them. And hopefully you can avoid using them yourself in the construction of your arguments. Okay, let's take a little break, come back in 10 minutes, and we'll have our second half of class.